Slides?
That's perfect.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Babita. I'm working as a postdoc bioinformatician here at European Genome-PHENOME Archive based in Barcelona. And well, thanks for the invitation. I didn't know the scope of this workshop, so I have prepared my slides at a very introductory level, but I will be happy to take questions, or if some kind of collaboration happens after this, I will be really happy. And if you have good technical questions, for example, I can also divert you to our software developers or technicians so that they can answer you. So let me start with human genomics data. It's, of course, as we all know, it's a private data. It's as private or unique as our fingerprints. But I always say, I go as far as saying that it's not only unique as our fingerprints. In fact, it's more than that. It's about if your genomics data is not only revealing about yourself, but also about your ancestry or your future generation. So how much even you take the ownership of your own data, it's something debatable. And therefore, it's important to discuss about the privacy, about the data access, discoverability. Given, I mean, I'm talking about the privacy of the data set doesn't mean that all this data should be stayed locked in and never to be used for research or to scare public domain, as if they are already not scared that government is going to do something with the genomics data. So given said that, what are the measures we can use to make that data safe as possible, but at the same time as readily available to researchers as possible to extract maximum amount of information for medicines, for drug discovery and disease and all other things. So EGA is a non-profit institution. It's a European wide archive for all the genomic experiments that are done, whole genome sequencing, exome methylation. There are several type of genomic data studies, and the data is, so there is a mandatory deposition of the data before publication that has been prescribed from major journals now, and especially if the analysis is being carried out in Europe, so they are required to submit the data first to the EGA before publication. And then EGA has several layers of controlled access to it. There is a specific data access community that will, if somebody wants to access this data for further studies, or they would have to go through the DAC. The DAC committee is not, EGA has not selected them. It's every study, they are entitled to select their own DAC, to create their own DAC, the data access committee, so that these people are well informed about the scope of the research. Somebody wants to access that data, and then based on that, they can also grant access or deny the access of a user. And apart from that, the data as well is stored in a in an encrypted format. I will not go into the technical detail today, but happy to take questions later. We have around 16 petabytes of data as of now. By this year, 2022, the data is growing, is increasing. The COVID pandemic didn't stop any research. In fact, the numbers raised quite a lot. So this is, it's growing in volume. The data access is, the data is accessed by around almost, everywhere around the world. And likewise, the submitters are also, they are submitting, around the world. You can see, for example, USA has its own data repository, dbGaP, but they kind of prefer also to submit their data to European Genomics Archive. We think it could be because of the tight privacy rules here in Europe compared to any other countries. But today I would like to discuss, so all of this, what I presented is mainly the data so far has come from researchers, but this is a paper that was published in 2017, and there was a prophecy by Ivan Berning. He said that so far by 2012, only 1% of the data, genomics data, was coming from healthcare sector. And by 2017, the numbers were expected to go 20%. So means that more and more healthcare, clinicians and hospitals are going to generate their own genomics data. And then this is what is going to be available for the research community, like the patient's data, real patient's data. And by 2022, he prophesied that around 80% of that data that we see now will be coming from the medical healthcare sector. How far this prophecy is true? We are in 2022, almost by the end, and this is not true. We do not see, in EGA, for example, data coming from 80% of the data coming from healthcare sector. It's still very much so from researchers. Why this didn't become true? Because there are a lot of challenges right now in the healthcare sector that needs to be tackled before the data, they feel secure enough to share this kind of patient's data to the community, research community. So I've highlighted a few of those challenges. For example, we have discussed before also geographical distribution of the data. Now with GDPR, the data is supposed to cannot leave the borders. It's supposed to stay where it was generated. Data access, we have discussed a lot today, these 2 days, about the access challenges, data access, what sort of access you want to provide, clinical interoperability, data interoperability, because, especially in European countries with different languages, how the data is stored varies a lot, the structure varies a lot. So there is no crosstalk happening. Not equipped for high volume data. We also discussed this in the breakout session. It's quite pricey to store such data, and I don't think medical care, healthcares especially, are equipped for that kind of challenge. Then, of course, technical challenges of, not everybody is equipped with informaticians that can have, their backend servers ready or secure access ready and all of that. So this is also another, and attitude and actions, as I mentioned before. People feel a bit scared about talking about genomics data and, open access and all of that. So this needs to be changed as well. And the governance and everything around that comes with the data or genomics data. So I'm happy to say that EGA, from our side, we are in collaborating with different projects, different standards, different tools to make all of these challenges, to tackle these challenges. So for example, I will just mention today one, which is a federated EGA, which is to tackle the challenge of geographical distribution of the data. So how can we keep the data where it was generated, but at the same time make it discoverable from everywhere? And this is the project that was developed here at EGA, which is called local EGA. So basically, you can copy the entire central EGA to your country or your entity or hospital. Everybody can have their own EGA. Now, the code is available on GitHub openly. However, there are many, layers, like there is a legality, there's a signing of the agreement and all of that. But given that is done, people can, basically create their own EGA. There are different countries that have already installed or worked on their own local EGA, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Luxembourg so far. And many other countries are working on it. Germany, I think, has already have their own EGA. They are calling it GAGH. Yeah. And there are other countries that we are collaborating now, and they are very happy to work with local EGA. So very quickly and briefly, how it works is so the metadata will be searchable or available at the central EGA. So anybody can log into ega.archive and egarchive.org, and then they should be able to search the data. This will be public. However, when they have to download the file, the communication will be made towards the vault, towards the where the files are stored, these encrypted files, and then from there the crosstalk will happen and back and forth about between central EGA and the local EGA. This is one, I think this is the, yeah. So this is a small animation about how this crosstalk communication is happening. Let me see if it works. Yep. So yeah, so there is central EGA, and then connected with a local EGA, there will be user credentials that will be verified at the central EGA, the access. Once it is verified, the ping will be made what the user is searching, so that trigger will go to local EGA for where the data is, the communication to the vault file. So, and from there, the EGAF, which is the file that will be the access the user is asking, that will communicate. So this is the back and forth communication that is happening between local and central. And based on after everything established, a secure connection established, the files, user can see those files or access those files. Okay. Everything else is available at GitHub. There is a documentation. There is, all sort of very easily explained steps that somebody has to go or do to have this local EGA on their side. And I recommend you to take a look there. But what about discovery, healthcare data discovery? So this was what we were talking about, was the storage. I want to say that the reality is a bit scary from the discovery side of the healthcare data. So this is what we see now. For example, Facebook groups now are looking for patients with suffering from certain disease, and they are looking for a specific mutation kind. On one hand, we are talking about privacy of the data and how to keep it safe, but people who are actually in need, where do they go? They create this sort of groups on Facebooks, or write blog posts, or just to find patients like themselves. So this is another scary reality, is that the reports are stored still in PDF format. There is no common consensus or common agreement between the different hospitals, like how these reports should be stored or how this data could be fetched later to make a good purpose of this. So these are real valuable data because it comes from real patients. Imagine their usage in machine learning or this AI studies, where you need heterogeneity in the data and you need as much data as possible. This kind of this sort of data is lost. We are not able to use them. Another thing, as I mentioned before, is the interoperability. There is no communication happening between the different hospitals, as in the data is stored in different languages. They are not stored in proper ontologies. There is one system now which is called OMOP, or also there is FIRE, another common data model that's being developed that can read or take this EHR, convert them back into ontologies or map them into ontologies, so that based on those ontologies, you can provide you can set up any tool or APIs to search on those data. So things are happening in this community, but very slow progress. Another thing is that hospital, even among themselves, even the hospital with same franchisee, they are not talking to each other. So there is no common legalities or guidelines in place so the hospitals can talk. And this was revealed to us when we started collaborating with a group of different hospitals here in Catalonia, that they mentioned that they do not crosstalk, or they do not exchange information. They are not allowed. And then we developed or we started using this pilot project called Beacon as a common API tool, sort of, so that these hospitals can search in each other's information, that if they have seen this patient with same prognosis or same symptoms, and what were their diagnosis, what was prescribed, etc. So what is the possible solution? As we saw before in the healthcare, there is so much of, mainly it was involved in the scariness of how to access or how to give access to those data. So what we started doing is, or the Beacon idea was born to shift the focus from the centralized knowledge discovery. The centralized will be your data stays at the center, and you send the query to talk with the data, as in, do you see this mutation in your data? And then the database returns the answer. So to shift that focus from there to keep the query central and data distributed, as I mentioned before, decentralization of the data. So based on this principle, the Beacon tool was created, which was basically that every entity beaconizes their data set on top of whatever database they use. It's not, Beacon is agnostic of their database infrastructure or what sort of login they are using or what sort of privacy structures they have in place. Is just on top of their data set, they can add Beacon or beaconize the data. And then eventually all of these, beacons will be connected together, the response will be aggregated and shown back to the user. I will skip this part. It's just that whatever data you have, doesn't matter, registries, biobank, etc. The idea is to map them onto common model, which is, we call it Beacon model, and then ingest it to MongoDB and put an API on top of it to crosstalk. Right now, the Beacon model is based on typical genetic testing phases, but it is also highly customizable for any kind of data, imaging data or neurological diseases, cardiovascular diseases, whatever, plant, in fact, even. So it's viruses, plants, etc. So what I will show now today is this genomics beacon, which is based around genetic testing information. For example, a patients goes first for biopsy, sample preparation, sequencing. They sequence the DNA, they analyze the DNA results and the softwares they have used for analysis. Then calling out the variant that are different, and then medical intervention. So the model again is based on the individual data, biosamples data, run, what sort of machines was used, what sort of results sequencing analysis were used, cohorts, data sets, and genomic variation. So all of these different information you can map to this model and then beaconize your data. This I have already mentioned before. The idea is to pool all of these different beacons together to send a common query and aggregate the response, shown it to the user. Again, the extension of that would be, beaconized data all over the world. So there should be, doesn't matter where the data is, the data should stay there, and then queries should be sent all over. Beacon comes with the different layers of privacy. So first is for public, for example, it can only show, entity can choose to show only yes and no responses. So do you have this mutation in male more than 45 years old? Hospital can choose yes or no, and that's it. Like, for more information, contact us. Registered user, for example, they can go a step further, which is like, okay, we have 10 cases or 123 cases like that, what you're searching. And if you have certain sort of access granted, it can show you complete record. So this is the type of access level type. This is one of the examples of what this access looks like. So for example, Boolean for the same mutation, this is, I'm searching on chromosome 22, a mutation of if C is changing to T. And the Boolean response will be yes, this is in our data set, but for more information, whatever the handover is provided, they can contact there. And if you try to access full counts or a response, it will raise you an error that you should be logged in. And if you have access granted, full version you can show everything, like here I'm showing annotations and different information about that mutation. Again, the idea is to keep this as intuitive as somebody goes on Google and types information. So even though the data is privacy, the discovery should not be that difficult to be made. So it should be as easy as somebody who would really, people who want to who are creating Facebook groups, it should be so easy for them that they should be able to get this kind of information through a Google kind of search. So that's what we are trying to make with Beacon now. And yeah, again, I said it's the internet. What we would like to be is it is a go-to place for genomics information. And with that, I would like to thank the Beacon team. All people from all over the world were involved in this project. Some were testers, some were mentors, some came with their use cases, especially the EGA team here. So a lot of work has been done in this project from past few years. And yes, thank you all for giving me opportunity to present here. I'm happy to